very good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to ASEAN Vision Dialogue. With me, Sreynou, the host of today's program. Well, the rapid development of Internet and communication technology have materially altered many characteristics of the concept of the learning environment. And since the outbreak of the COVID-19, since late 2019, the world, both developed and developing countries, have adopted significantly to another transition from a face-to-face education to a digital one. So today, we have the great pleasure to meet our guest speaker to review and explore the opportunity and challenges of online learning in the post-pandemic. And today, our guest speaker is Mr. Venghong. He is a president of the Global Pathway International School and a lecturer at Institute for Strategic Studies and Public Policy of the Royal University of Phnom Penh. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Venghong to our program. Greetings, Mr. Venghong.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here with us today. So let's start our discussion with regard to the online learning in the post-pandemic. So after the historic disruption of the pandemic, we can see that most schools are back open worldwide. Okay. So can you provide an overview of the online learning in Cambodia? Yes.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me, and hello everyone. So basically, after the COVID-19 pandemics, we can see that many schools have already moved back to the physical classes. But the point is that there are also some legacy also that the online learning keep having impact on the current educational system, especially in Cambodia as well. So if you look at the case of the public school and also the private school, we can see that there could be different impacts on both sectors, which means that for the case of the public school, we can see that the outbreak of the COVID-19 has a lot of negative impacts on public school. But because of these kinds of a pandemic, that's why it led to the accelerations of the online learning in the public school, that we have never thought of having the online learning at the year of 2020, for example. But because of the outbreak of COVID-19, you can see that school in the public school, they have already started to integrate the online learning into the learning system as well. And in terms of the private school, we can see that private schools started integrated online learning years before the COVID-19 outbreak already. I mean, for those kinds of international school, especially. And so which means that even those after or during the COVID-19 and after the COVID-19, many private schools, they are doing very fine. So that's why there are not much impacts on the private school. But what is more important is that after the COVID-19, many private schools started to advance their online learning, because some students have already enjoyed learning online already. So that's why private schools decided to work on both the physical classes and also the online classes as well.
All right. Yeah. Yes. So it means that e-learning is kind of like another alternative to the face-to-face classroom, right?
Yeah. So actually, we believe that it is complementary to the physical class learning. So which is that sometime after the COVID-19, you can see that private school started to use the online learning as the alternative in case it is necessary. For example, like in case there is an online makeup class, for example, and then we switch to online class. So we don't have to have the physical class, just only the complementary role.
All right. So thank you, Mr. Venghong. Based on your personal experience as a lecturer as well as a school president, so during the COVID-19 pandemic, what were the challenges, the biggest challenges that facing the distance learning? Yes.
Okay, so as the experience of a lecturer at the university, basically. So we can see that because the subject that we are teaching, so I am teaching is the international relation, and it's more of the content based in general. So for us, it would not be that challenging in delivering our contents, but the main challenge is about skills that we would like to equip our students with soft skills, for example, like presentation skills. So these kinds of skills that also allow the student, to have improve their confidence, for example. And we can see that these kinds of soft skills, it could not be able to be achieved through the online class. But at least the 70-80% of our courses mainly focus on content. That's why it's not that challenging for us. And in terms of aspect of my school, the international school, you can see that because we are the private school and we have already been prepared for those kinds of online platforms since before the pandemic, for example. We have been introduced to those kinds of online learning already by the other various institutions that encourage us to use the online platform to deliver lesson. And that's why for the case of private school like us, we are not that challenging. But the main challenge is about the student in the sense that they need to have a lot of material in order to get access to the online learning, right? So for example, in the case of their mobile phones or a computer, in order to get access to the online class, the understanding of the online application, online platform. So for example, like Zoom and also the others platform that allow students, to get access to the online class, right? And also the other tools of communication as well, like they need to go through the internet access. So we can see that for the private school like us, especially in Phnom Penh, we do not face many challenges compared to the other school, especially in the rural area that have limited in terms of resources, because students find it hard to get access to the internet, for example, or even though they can get access to internet, but the speed limits does not allow them to easily acquire their knowledge in the class time. Yeah.
All right. Yes. So those are the challenges, and especially for the rural area, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So in your opinion, what way is more effective in the classroom? Whether you prefer face-to-face or virtual learning, or even like we call blended learning? Yes.
Okay. So to my opinion, maybe before the COVID-19 pandemic and before we started to have the online learning, we believe that we can say that physical class is more effective than online class, because we have not tried or have not fully tried using the online platform in order to allow students to learn online and also allow teachers to teach online as well. But after the 2 or 3 years of using the online platform, and we can see that it's hard to tell which one is more effective. But in general, we can see that the physical class can still allow teacher to teach better and also allow students to learn better as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, some skill can only easily acquire through the physical class. For example, like the attitude. The attitude can be changed over the interaction, especially face-to-face. But in terms of online, we don't have those kinds of face-to-face interaction.
Yes.
So it's hard to tell whether their attitude should be corrected or not, right? Or is there whether the attitude that they have is proper or not. So that's why they do not have these kinds of improvement in terms of their attitude. So that's why, in my opinion, I can see that. But right now, if you look at the case of some case that we have experienced so far, like the online learning allow us to have the new opportunity, to allow the teacher who are abroad, for example, to teach from those kind of country to Cambodia, so which means that they can deliver their lesson from abroad to Cambodia. Right now, we still do have the online class. Then our course instructor is at the US, but he can still deliver his lesson to his student in Cambodia. So you can see that this is it would not be the complementary, but this is the way that allow student and teacher can teach and learn with each others without having the physical distance as barrier. Otherwise, which means that the teachers at the US could not be able to teach them in Cambodia unless they need to move to Cambodia to teach. So because of the online platform, and students have already get used to it, and our teacher has already trained as well. So that's why you can see that we can achieve our learning outcome as well, even though we use the online platform. Yeah.
All right. With regard to both physical and online learning, I can see that there's just a few challenges, especially for just based on the country and also from the rural area.
Yeah.
But in Phnom Penh, we can see that students and teachers they can enjoy learning online.
Yes,
right?
we can say that. But in practice, when students can have the opportunity to study physical class like this, so they prefer have the physical class. And teacher the same. We also prefer having the physical classroom because we want to have face-to-face interaction. And especially for my school, the Global Pathway International School, we also have the language course. And because of the language course, for example, like when we want to improve students' speaking skill, so this can happen only through their interaction, face-to-face, because face-to-face interaction allows them to, as I mentioned earlier, we can look at the other people's reactions and whether do we need to repeat again or not, for example, right? Because we can see each other. And then confidence also can grow through face-to-face interaction as well. And one more thing is also about the interaction between student and teacher. So which means that sometimes when they have question, they can ask, right? But sometimes even though they have question, but they don't ask because they're afraid of asking question, for example. But because of face-to-face interaction, the teacher can send that student has a question or not. And then he or she can respond immediately, right? So you can see that in general, still a physical class can be more effective in terms of teaching, especially language course like us.
All right, so I'm interested to know more about your opinion because I can see that last year during ASEAN, Cambodia as an ASEAN chairmanship, the ASEAN leaders have adopted one declaration on the because digital transformation of the education system in ASEAN. It means that ASEAN leaders they try to support and encourage more e-learning in the region. So in this regard, so what do you think, what strategies that teachers or educators or trainers should adopt in order to improve the student online learning outcomes?
Okay, so this question is very important in the sense that because we are moving forward, and then this is the future directions that we will focus more on online learning. So because this is new to us, and then it also there are more opportunity embedded in these kinds of online learning that we haven't explored, right? So that's why for the roles of the teacher, the first thing is that they need to make sure that they are well trained. So in terms of institutional level and in terms of governmental level, so the government need to provide support to the teachers because for private institution we can provide the support to them, right? For the case of public school, they need to have the support from the government as well. And then one more thing is about the improvement of the internet access. So the government need to ensure that people in our country are able to get access to internet anytime, anywhere, right? Because when we talk about the online learning, it need to align with the flexibility. So you can study anywhere. So for example, you are at a coffee shop, for example, you also can have class. So that's why internet access is very important. And the government need to also support that one. And for us, as our institution, what we can do is we're trying to train our student and make sure that our student and our teacher understand the platform that we are using so far. Because recently, the platform that we use, for example, like Microsoft Teams, is very useful for education, but not all teachers and students understand well about these kinds of learning and teaching platform. And for our teachers, some of us feel like it's more convenient to just only giving lecture through the Zoom, right?
Yes.
So we don't want to involve much in this kinds of Microsoft Teams because we do not have much support. So that's why the first thing is need to provide support to our teachers in terms of knowledge, in terms of knowledge of using the online platform, in terms of resources, and in terms of the other technical support as well, so that allow the teacher to communicate with student and communicate with parent as well.
All right. Yes. Thank you. We have another question. Since we have known that for developed countries, they already like adjusted their infrastructure technologies and also like in terms of adapt to the e-learning. But for developing countries, like the education is still in recovery. So from your perspective, it's like what is the future of e-learning in developing countries, especially for CLMV countries?
Okay.
Yes.
So for if you look at the case of our sub-region like CLMV here and the roles of our government in order to if you look at the case of how the CLMV trying to develop their e-learning, they need to have a lot of involvement from the government support in the sense that if you look at the case of Cambodia alone. For the case of Cambodia, as I mentioned earlier, the main challenge is still about the accessibility to internet or even the electricity, right? For the case of rural area, and then but for the case of Myanmar, a similar percentage, and for the case of Laos, okay, also not much higher compared to the Cambodia and Myanmar in terms of the access to the electricity. So, and then for the case of Vietnam, you can see that they have a lot of access to the electricity. So the futures of the e-learning would not fairly distributed in terms of their development. But it does not mean that we could not, we fall behind compared to the case of Vietnam or the other country in the region, because it depends mainly on what are we need in order to improve, in order to develop the online education. So, but the point is that for our country, I can see that our government has done a great job already in terms of trying to support our public teachers, for example, public school, in terms of the resources. Right? You can see that when during COVID-19, we're trying to install the TV, install the internet access. So when crisis happen,
Yes.
we can solve it. But the point is that the major problem is we don't continue to promote it. That is the main problem that we could not move further. But what if we can also trying to continue promoting it? You can see that it also allow many students to get access to these kinds of online education. But one more point that I have seen so far in terms of development of e-learning in CLMV, we can see that many countries here in the region here, they trying to give more importance to the online learning. Yes. So which is that in the next 5 or 10 years, the online learning does not only play the complementary role, but could even play a leading role in education itself. So let me give you one example about the case of independent learner. So for independent learner, they prefer going to the online learning, access to the online courses, resources like, for example, like Coursera, for example, that have an abundance of the resources. So they don't have to just come into class, to learn, right? Because when we talk about education can be achieved through formal education and informal education. So they can equip themselves with those kinds of skills to develop themselves. So you can see that the future online education can be more important, far more important than the current situation in even the CLMV countries.
All right. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Venghong. I think we come to an end of our discussion. So thank you once again, Mr. Venghong, for your kind participation.
Yes, thank you for having me as well.
Yes, look forward to having you again in the next episode. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, the Asian Vision Dialogue has now come to an end. Thank you for watching. See you next time.